G'day, I'm Matt. This is my YouTube channel, and I thought I'd just make a kind of guide for Mythic Plus Shadow Priests. I've been getting a lot of messages both in game and on Discord through the How to Priest Discord channel about like what I do in Mythic Plus and talent builds, general tips, gearing choices. So I decided I'd make this miniature guide to go over those things, just what I do. A bit of background on myself: I raid in Honestly on Frostmon. I'm 11 out of 11 Mythic, and currently the number one Shadow Priest on Raid.io in terms of Mythic Plus score. I don't think that really means I'm the best Shadow Priest in the world for Mythic Plus, but just the highest rated. So let's get started. In this guide, I'm going to be talking about talent choices, just discussing the pros and cons of each talent choice and seeing which ones I prefer. Gearing, which I think is a pretty simple aspect of the Shadow Priest Mythic Plus life, and just general playstyle tips. Any tips and tricks that I've picked up in my runs that hopefully will help you out. Yeah. Okay, so talents. This will just be a general overview of what I personally use and thoughts that I go through when I take talents. Might not be 100% right. If you have any different thoughts, please feel free to comment below, and we can kind of reach a consensus of what is actually best, because personally, I'm not sure. So, level 15. Straightforward. There's no discussion here. Everyone knows you take Twist of Fate. It's going to have a high uptime in Mythic Plus. It's the go-to. Level 30. This one, again, straightforward. You want Body and Soul. That burst of move speed, it's better. It's not great, but it's better than nothing. Mania, I love in raids, but in Mythic Plus, you're often going to be ending a fight without Insanity because you'll be in Void form. It'll all drain away. So if you take Mania, you're super slow. That's all there is to it. It's not ideal. My favorite scenario is, say you're in Archway, you've just killed Ivanir. It's the last boss. You need to head to the center room to kill the final boss, and you've taken Mania. That's going to be a long walk. Body and Soul will cut that time down a little bit, which is very nice. And we have Masochism. Masochism, that's the one you want to take in high keys, especially, and some tyrannical keys. I wouldn't be too worried about it if you're doing things below a 20 and you have a decent gear level. Pride as should help you there with a little bit of avoidance. But if you're doing high keys and you're doing dungeons where the hits come in frequently enough that Dispersion won't save you, for example, Smash Spite in Blackrock Hold, Masochism is very valuable. I would take it in, just to name a few, Ivajara, Darkheart Thicket, Horse of Valor, and like I said before, Blackrock Hold. Very valuable in all of those. There are probably some more dungeons that are strong in. I just can't think of them right now. You can use your own thought process. Think of the healer that's healing your run, and do you want to make their life easier? Upakara is another good choice for Flame Wreath specifically. Just remember, you do no damage when you're dead, so being a snail for survivability is not a big problem, especially if you build a speed set, which I'll get into later. Level 45. This row on the face looks very obvious, and it is, but it's also a bit disappointing. You want Mind Bomb. It's a great talent. It's a stun on a 30-second cooldown. It times really nicely with Cephas. The downside of it is that you'll inevitably Mind Bomb something in Sanguine and heal it to full, but you have a Cephas proc, so who cares, right? Psychic Voice, it spreads the mobs out, it breaks on damage. Mind Bomb just beats it, hands down. It's more of a PvP talent. Even then, I think most of the time Mind Bomb is better. Dominant Mind, this one is a letdown of a talent. You look at DKs and Warlocks, they have an Enslave mechanic, 100% uptime basically, indefinite. They have a pet. Priests, ours only lasts 30 seconds with a 2-minute cooldown. There are some situations where it could be really strong if it wasn't for that. My go-to example is, again, Archway. Corsilax, the mobs just before him, they put down the haste bubble. They'd be so strong if you could mind control. It's not too much different from the Warlock's Chaos Springer and Slave in the same dungeon, but we can't do it. So you're going to take Mind Bomb and you're going to feel let down. The Dominant Mind is useless. So, level 60. This is the first talent row where I kind of have a debate in most dungeons, and that's mostly because Ally is your raid build. You know what Ally does. My biggest problem with it is that it doesn't really show up on the DPS meters. You don't know the impact it's giving you in damage wise. You can feel the power, I suppose, the quality of life of having the extra haste when you end a void form. There's not that jarring 50% haste drop out of nowhere. It kind of just flows really nicely, but it's hard to tell what kind of damage it actually does. Void Ray, similarly, you can tell the damage it does. It's just hard to tell if it's better than Lingering Insanity. Personally, I think it's better in Lower Kara. Like really trash dense dungeons. Lower Kara is so good for that. And think maybe see the Triumvirate. The other dungeons I'm not entirely sold on. I have run Void Ray in a lot of dungeons. And there are some dungeons where there's 1 or 2 packs that'll be really nice for Void Ray, but the rest of it isn't that trash dense. So I haven't come to a conclusion yet. My focus has shifted a bit away from Void Ray into Lingering Insanity, which I personally find a bit disappointing. But Lower Kara, I think Void Ray is super strong there. So, let me know if you have any thoughts on either way in the comments. We can try and come to a conclusion which is actually better. Level 75. This one I think is simple. I haven't personally been a fan of Sand Lane since Nighthold, and Shadowy Insight I think I've used like twice in PvP. It's just, I don't rate it that much. I don't really do much PvP anymore. Auspicious Spirits, it's not make or break. It's not the strongest talent in the world. It's just a little bit of quality of life. Gives you insanity quickly. It's better than having no talent at all, and I think it beats Sand Lane and Shadowy Insight. Level 90. This one, thankfully, there are 2 talent choices here, but they're very straightforward. Basically, it can be broken down to, is it Fortified Weak, and do I want trash damage? Yes. Misery. Do I want boss damage? Bender. That's pretty much what it is. If you need trash damage, you take Misery. If you need boss damage, you take Bender. Misery does give you access to Shadow Fiend, which for me, with 1 trait of Fiending Dark, makes it last 35 seconds. More will, push it up towards 40 seconds. In Fortified Weeks, where the boss fights barely take over a minute, maybe 2 minutes tops on higher keys, Shadow Fiend can kind of carry the damage you would lose from having shorter void forms as a consequence of not taking Bender. So, Misery is actually not that bad for boss damage as you'd think. It just comes down to whether or not it's gonna be make or break on bosses, which in Fortified Weeks, most of the time I don't think is the case. Unless you're doing keys above 20s, then you might need to think about going back to Bender. But otherwise, you just take Misery and not really care. Level 100. This one, again, is a bit of a debate. Personally, I'm a Shadow Crash boy. Ever since its buff, I think it's really nice. It gives you the insanity you need. It's really good. I find that you get to use it twice, maybe in 3 times on most trash packs at the keys I do, especially in Fortified. I think even in lower keys you'd be able to do that, and I think its value outweighs that of Legacy of the Void. I do still take Legacy, but that's on tyrannical weeks where I feel I really need the boss damage. I really need to eke out every bit of boss damage I can. But even then, Shadow Crash isn't that far behind on bosses. So taking it might not sack as much boss damage as you think. Okay, so now that talents are out of the way, we can talk about gear sets. Gear sets, I think, is a very simple aspect of Shadow. It can be as complicated as you want it to be. I personally have 5 gear sets. I think, well, it's more 4.5. I think you really only need 3. 2 if you're doing low keys, 3 if you're pushing higher keys. Those gear sets being your single target boss DPS set, your AoE trash gear set, and an avoidance set. I do also have a speed set and an avoidance set that's slightly tweaked, but you don't need those. So going into the single target boss spec gear set, I have T21 4 set, T22 set, my normal trinkets, Cephas, Mengazas. Yours could look different. it doesn't really matter. It's just whatever will make you do the most boss DPS. For me, that's this gear set. For you, it might be something different. Next, we have the trash gear set. This one I think is probably the most important when it comes to doing trash DPS as Shadow Priest, and that's this legendary, Heart of the Void. You can play without it. Void Eruption does do a lot of damage now. It's just Heart of the Void makes it hit like a truck. Cephas I think is also very important for trash. The way I use it is I'll proc it generally right away at the start of a fight, and I'll dot everything and I'll get my Void Eruption off quickly. The benefit of using it right away is that first off, I get to use it. It gets my dots up, and I get to do my Void Eruption quickly. The second benefit is that I might get 2 procs off on a single trash pack, which means I get the benefit of having it while I'm in Void form, as well as getting to use it to get me into Void form quickly, which I think is super powerful. Your other gear doesn't really matter too much. I use 2 set T21 and 2 set T20. The T20 is mostly for the Insanity generation. I think if I'm spending Mind Seer enough to try and get into Void form, getting the extra 10 Insanity from Mind Blast is super nice. That pushes it up to 25% Insanity, 25 Insanity just from a single Mind Blast cast. It's a lot of Insanity. I think it's super worth getting. I also use the T21. I just like the 2 set bonus. I think it's value, especially it synergizes well with the T20. And Mind Flay is going to be something I'm going to be pressing a lot. So having Mind Flay crit is nice. It's a shame it doesn't affect Mind Seer, but it's still really strong. I don't think you need tier at all for the trash gear set. I think the higher item level gear, the better. For me, it works out that the tier 21 is my highest item level gear, and I just really like the tier 20, so it's pretty convenient. Trinkets, I use Terminus Signaling Beacon and Spectral Thurible. Can use anything really. I just like these 2. Terminus Signaling Beacon I think is very strong, and you should try and get one. Those small AoE packs that Shadow just doesn't touch, you can do damage with Signaling Beacon. There's some packs where my damage consists of Shadow Crash, Signaling Beacon, Thurible, and Mind Seer, because all I've done is put a Shadow to Pain on one mob and spammed Mind Flay. Next up, we have my first Avoidance gear set. This is my main Avoidance gear set. This is the one I use when I'm terrified that I'm going to die. I'll have Masochism, I'll have Pride As, I'll have Powered Shield up. It's for Hate Coil, it's for Ivanir, it's for Zakal, it's for Smash Spite. It's for those bosses that hit frequently with big bursts of damage that Pride As can help block. I'm not sure if I'd use it on Herja. Herja is nice, but often your Pride As just gets eaten by her Storm, and it's not really doing much. It helps to heal for 1 second, but it won't save you from those big bursts of damage. That said, theoretically I wouldn't use it, but I probably still would, because Herja scares me a lot. I also have my mini avoidance set, which is exactly the same. It has 16.7% avoidance. The only difference is that instead of Pride As, I use Cephas. It gives me a little bit extra damage, because using an avoidance gear set, it really hurts your DPS, but if you don't survive, you're doing no DPS anyway. So using Stam Flasks, using Versatility Food, using Pride As, using Avoidance, it's all good. Even if you do 1 million DPS, that's more than you'd be doing if you were dead. On the topic of survivability, there's a trinket I don't have, but I think everyone should work towards getting, and that is Ishkar's Fell Shield Emitter from Antoran High Command. Basically what that trinket would do is it lets you put a shield on someone or yourself. It's about 1 million, gives you extra versatility. It could be the difference between living and dying. This is Raid Finder difficulty, which is only 1.1. If you go up to Mythic, it's 1.7. It's pretty strong. If your entire group has it, you can just rotate through the shields on each person, and it really could keep everyone alive, where otherwise people might get one shot to certain abilities. The final gear set is my speed set. I was talking about it earlier when I was discussing how slow you are with Masochism. The speed set, you don't really need it, but it's a very, very valuable gear set to use. For me, it gives 134% move speed with Body and Soul, 174. I'm not using Body and Soul right now, but it's very strong. You don't need all speed on every single piece. I do, but to kind of illustrate how little difference it actually adds, we can look at this. I have 7,726 speed. This chest has 838, so over 10%. I take that off, my speed barely moves at all. You really don't need to worry too much about it. Just try and get there. The main things that give you speed are the cloak enchant and Cephas. You only really need like 3 to 4 other speed pieces. And it's just a gear set that you can swap in and out of when you're running to places. Be careful if you're using signaling beacon and it's up, because swapping out of it will put it on a 30-second cooldown, which obviously if you're planning on using it isn't ideal. If you're being really safe, you could put that in your speed set so it doesn't go on cooldown. And just make sure you swap before you get in combat. Otherwise, for me, it's a big DPS loss. I'm 933 in this gear set instead of like 960. So be careful there. And that is pretty much all the gear you need. Gear isn't that important for Shadow. It's, like I said at the start, it's the chest, Cephas, Bengazes. Alright, so now that I've gone over gear sets, talent choices, I think it's a good idea to kind of talk about a few tips for specific dungeons that I've picked up. They could be pretty handy in mostly staying alive. Actually, I think they're all entirely focused on staying alive. General playstyle is something you'll pick up. You know, when to use Shadow Crash. I prefer to use that at the start of the pulls, just because you can often get too off. Things like that, you'll figure that out. It's not too difficult. I think these tips are pretty important though. So we'll go down the list with any dungeons I can think of that have special things. If I have recorded videos of them in the past, I'll overlay them here. Otherwise, we'll just talk about it. Ilisana in Blackrock Hold. This is a pretty important one for me, at least, because I suck at her charge normally. This Dark Rush. There's an issue with it, or maybe I'm just really stupid, that when she does it, you run out of it, but you get instantly ticked and you just die, especially on higher keys. My group found a solution to that, and that is it's kind of using either a bug or an intended effect, we're not sure which, where the last person charged by her doesn't actually get ticked by the fire. So what we do is we set up Warlock gateways, and after the first glaive comes out, we all click the gateway and we just stand still, so that way we're all stacked on top of each other and the last person is under us. And then she charges and the fire spreads everywhere, and we're right on top of the fire, but we don't get ticked from it, so we can just backpedal out and then we're completely safe. Generally what happens is you get to gateway the first one. The second one you have to do normally, but because you don't have to worry about too much, you just use all your defensives like Dispersion, Dark Pact, Bubble, whatever you have, and just live. And the third one you get to gateway again, and she shouldn't really get a fourth one off. If she's gotten a fourth one off, first off, your cooldowns will probably be back up, but second off, you probably screwed up somewhere down the line, so it's not something that's important. Also in Blackrock Hold, just a really minor one, just before the fight starts on Amalgam of Souls, you can shackle undead, the neutral mob that's flying outside, and they'll give you Cephas just on pull. It's pretty handy, especially if you use the invis trick where you don't have prone power, you're kind of missing some damage. Cephas can help push that along. Next up, we have Darkheart Thicket. This one I definitely don't have any footage for, but I know it exists and I've done it. I just haven't recorded it. Shade of Xavius. His Nightmare Bolt, the way his abilities work is that they're on a 3 spell cycle. So imagine he does, or maybe 4, I'm not sure where Festering Rip comes in, but imagine he does Feed on the Weak, Nightmare Bolt, Induce Paranoia. That's a 3 set. Then, so if he's cast Nightmare Bolt, he can't cast Nightmare Bolt again until he's done Induce Paranoia and Feed on the Weak. But if Nightmare Bolt is the last one in his set of 3, he can cast it again, so you have to be kind of careful. But I'm saying all that because the way you can solve that is if you're out of range, like 50 yards plus out of range, his Nightmare Bolt can't go on you. So if you're really worried about dying on certain keys, you can just stand out of range until Nightmare Bolt's done, and then you can walk in, do some damage, walk back out, all that stuff. Because you kind of need to save Dispersion for his 50% or else you're dead. You can also use a Lock Gateway to run out of range the second he starts casting you. That also works. Unfortunately, you can't run when he starts casting you because it will hit you. You're just not fast enough. There is a weird interaction where you can run out far enough away that the Nightmare Bolt still hits you, but you don't get silenced. But that's not too important because you'll be dead on higher keys. Another tip, which if you watch the MDI, you saw with Quinn's guild, Quinn's groups, if the projectile's already in the air, it doesn't matter what you do, it's going to hit you for the damage you were going to take when it was cast. So if you disperse when it's in midair, it's going to hit you through dispersion and you'll die. So you have to make sure you do it before the cast finishes. Otherwise, you're in for a bad time. Next dungeon, Ivajara. This one, there will be a video somewhere on the screen talking about it. Hate coils, AoE, focused lightning. You generally cannot dodge this. This is known to not be dodgeable. Sometimes Matthxw Pride has avoidance. If you're on a high enough key, they won't save you. So you do need to do this strategy, which I'm showing on the screen, where if the tank tanks Hate Coil on one side of the room, you can run to the other side of the room, and you're not too far away to get hit by the out of bounds spell, but you're out of range of Focus Lightning, so you don't get hit by it at all. It's another measure that completely ruins your DPS, but you'll be dead if you don't do it. So it's pretty valuable. Also in Ivajara, Warlord Parjesh, his spear, Impaling Spear, if you are a human, like I am, and you use Every Man for Himself, after you've gotten hit by the spear, you have to wait for the actual stun debuff. You can just trinket it, and you take no damage. So it's a good way to soak that mechanic if you have no adds up, you have no bop, your tank can't do it, for example. You just do it, you trinket it off, everyone's sweet. Another one is Horzavella. I do have a video for this one as well. It's for God King Scovold. He's Fellblaze Rush. As a Shadow Priest on a higher key, you can't survive this. Like, you can disperse one, but you're dying to the next one. It's just going to do too much. No avoidance, no masochism is going to save you. You can't live. So the solution is if you tank him near his throne on one side of it, you can be on the other side, and you're just casting. If you see him cast Fellblaze Rush on you, you can strafe back LOS, and he'll stop casting. He just won't do it at all. It's very good in dodging it. The scary part is that when he gets a shielding, does his where he throws down the fire ads, you can't be in that safe spot, otherwise you'll get fire there and the safe spot's useless. So you need to move back out, and there's one Fellblaze Rush he'll do each cycle before the ads die that you're not safe for. So you kind of have to hope that it doesn't go on you, or you have to use Dispersion, or you have to have an external or a lock gateway or 7.3.5 to come so you can be a Void Elf and you disjoint it. But yeah, being able to do that makes that boss a lot easier when it will otherwise be the scariest thing in the world. It's a nice tip, I think. Nelth's Lair. This one is specific to bolstering. The Trash Before Neuraxis, where there's the two big mobs and all the small mobs. A strategy that you can employ, which is very, very strong, is that you can mind control one of the big ads and you'll group AoE down on the small ads. Then you drop the big ad, and then you do the same thing with the other one. Blah blah. It reduces the bolstering, where otherwise you could have a 10-stack bolstering mob that has more health than the boss that you're about to fight. So it's a very good strategy. Some groups do the similar kind of thing where they root the mob and then drag the small ones away. Can't really say which is better. I think the mind control way will make you do personally less damage, but it does make it a little bit easier for your group because the mobs are already pre-stacked. All that stuff. It's a bit of priest utility. We also have utility in Quarter Stars with first boss, Master Spell. That's why you bring a Shadow Priest, obviously. And also Talixay's Guardians. I don't know if they are. This guy. Belgar, Disintegration Beam. This works similar to Scovold. You can LOS it if it's being cast at you. On some weeks, it's very, very important to do that because it really hurts. The difference is with Scovold, when you LOS it, he just doesn't cast it at all. With Belgar, he'll recast it. So if you want to be really safe in group, you need to have everyone LOS when it's time to cast it, so that way it just goes on the tank. But yeah, I think that's all the tips that I can really think of right now. So as a few closing thoughts, I thought I'd just briefly discuss how I rate Shadow Priest right now in Mythic Plus. I definitely think we're a lot better than we used to be. Like, that's hands down just way better than we used to be with the Void Eruption change and mostly that. And the Shadow Crush buff is pretty nice as well. but I do think we have more room before you really become on par with the meta classes like your warlocks, your boomkins, your hunters, rogues, warriors, pretty much every class actually. Um, I think the main thing is that it's still very clunky to get dots up on small packs. Um, there are there's just some packs we can't do damage for. The Terminus Beacon kind of carries that, but the fact that we need a trinket to do something other classes can do baseline is a bit frustrating. Um, what I think would be two small changes that'll be very nice to Shadow is first off, have the T21 two set affect Mindseer. It's a very small change. It doesn't really affect rating at all, but it'll be a huge buff to Mythic Plus. Maybe even make it less effective, like 20% bonus crit damage for Mindseer, just something along those lines. And secondly, something that'll synergize really well with it is have Shadow Crash work similar to Seed of Corruption, where it applies Shadow Pain to every target hit. You could balance Shadow Crash around that, like maybe even make it cost Insanity, I don't know. Maybe not that. Just add that to it. It's stealing from the Warlock's toolkit, but it'll add a lot of utility in damage that Shadow doesn't otherwise have, because instead of wasting 7 or 8 globals putting Shadow Pain up, we just use one, and then we Mind Flay, we get Eruption. It's pretty nice. It's like Misery but with Shadow Crash. It saves globals, more damage otherwise. That's just on the DPS side. On the survivability side, I'm not really sure what they can do, but Shadow doesn't live. Like outside Dispersion, even with Masochism, some bosses just kill us. I mean, we're not going to be Warlocks, we're not going to be invincible, but it would be nice to have something, maybe even give us back Mental Fortitude at 8%. I don't really understand why it was considered overpowered at 8%. It's really not that big a deal when you have Warlock Soul Leech at 15%. I would like that back. Maybe even make Fade do like Discipline, have it take reduced damage, increase Dispersion up to 90%, but even then you have the problem where it's 80-second cooldown. Maybe buff Masochism up to 15%. Just something to make Shadow survivable, because otherwise we're dead. And I don't like having to use a full avoidance set on a semi-scary boss, because otherwise I'll die, because that just hurts my damage. And why bring a class that needs to stack their damage to live when you can just bring one that lives normally? That's a dilemma, I feel. I think I'm not expecting many changes to Shadow before the expansion ends, but I'm hoping next expansion there are some things that address those concerns. Like, I like the Void Form mechanic, but I think it's not well designed for Mythic Plus, and I think it's the fact we're tied to it is one of the weaknesses. But I think Shadow's in a lot better spot. I feel like I'm not being carried in keys. I feel like I'm able to contribute. There are some dungeons where I can't keep up, and I think that's just a consequence of the spec, but it's a lot better than it used to be, and I think Shadow's definitely worth taking to runs. And yeah, I think that's where this video will end. It's my first time doing a guide type thing, so hopefully it answered any questions. If you have any others about talents, macros, weak auras even, just message down below and I'll help you out. If you have any advice of your own that you think I missed, please, again, leave it down in the comments. Hopefully I learned something from it. If not, other people will. And yeah, have a good one.